Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our adventure in the Cold Bog with the Cult of Jingz. Now it has been a while since the last episode in which our small village of Liviana faced some threats to say the least, but partially due to a powerful neuroquake from our leader Specs we escaped more or less unharmed. Coco and Jagna are the last two colonists who are still recovering from their injuries, and Specs is also still in a psychic coma, but apart from that we are doing okay, and that means it's time for the next bit of action. The timer on this quest right here is slowly ticking down, and I think we'll take it. 91 man-hunting Panthers, that could be interesting, but with 9 imperial champions to help us out, I think we should be able to manage. That is of course primarily because the Empire considers our helpers expendable, and without spoiling anything, the approach that I have in mind very much does the same. In terms of rewards, we are going for the double LTEX gear. Keep in mind that we have a potentially very powerful psycaster still imprisoned, and this should help them uncover their true potential. The 9 champions then arrive, as you can see, all equipped with melee weapons. A neat addition in the recent 1.4 update is to display those weapons below the character portraits, and we can see here a couple of swords and hammers, and of course all of our helpers are also equipped in heavy armor. Of course, as imperial troops, they also all come with death acidifiers, so we won't be able to take that gear off them, and while they now spend the next few hours waiting for the raid inside of our tree temple, we get the base ready for the attack. Mainly that means closing this last gap over by the river here. Currently it's just a bit too wide, and if we allow 91 man-hunting Panthers to rush through here, then even having 22 characters under our control won't do much to stop them. Instead, we need a much more narrow choke point to fully utilize the stopping power of our melee units, and so Donut, Freya and Armando are working tirelessly through the night to close off the base. At this point, you can also see another new edition of Rimworld 1.4, and that is rot stink, as decaying corpses are now giving off this gas that can potentially cause lung diseases, so we should probably get those bodies out of our bear cave quickly, at least if we don't want to add any further illnesses on top of the already fairly long list of injuries that our bears have. Just in that moment, we also receive another quest with a fairly short expiration timer. Once again, it is the Empire asking for help, and once again they are offering some rewards that could be very useful for our psycasters, although we definitely do not want to spawn a shuttle and, most importantly, a commander who needs to survive just hours before being attacked by 91 man-hunting Panthers. Still, we'll keep it in mind as Freya finally closes off the base in the early morning hours, and with only one more hour to go until the beasts arrive, let's take up positions. And just a few seconds before everyone gets to their spot, the animals then appear. And yes, here they are, 91 man-hunting Panthers, thanks to Randy's 500% threat scale. Let's see how this plays out. Now, the plan for this one is actually quite simple. We'll use our 9 champions as an imperial meat shield, with our colonists behind them firing through their ranks. Friendly fire only becomes an issue at distances over 5 tiles, so our helpers should be safe, at least from the back that is. The rest is very much up to them. If things do go south, then we can always retreat behind a second set of doors, possibly leaving 1 or 2 Imperial soldiers behind as a distraction, but for now let us hope that it does not come to that. I also just realized during editing that Jagna here does not actually have a weapon, but we'll let her take part in the bloodshed either way. However, arguably the most important addition to our ranks is Freya, who has just increased her psi focus to barely over 50%, and that is enough to unleash a flashstorm, or to be precise, 2 of them. Now, in my opinion, Flashstorm is actually one of the weaker psychic abilities, considering it is a rank 5 power, as lightning will strike randomly anywhere in that big blue radius. So even with a large group of enemies remaining in the same place, the chances for this ability to actually do large amounts of damage are fairly slim, although they can be improved somewhat by stacking multiple Flashstorms on top of each other. And that is exactly what we're doing here, providing hopefully enough help to turn the tide our way, even though, as you can see, we are beginning to take some casualties, and there is still a decent number of animals left. Skipping ahead a bit, the lightning did strike true a couple of times, but we're also down to only 3 soldiers still standing, at least on the Empire side. Our people have yet to be harmed. However, with more and more Panthers breaking through, and with Squix and Took also suffering their first injuries, I think it's time to call for the retreat. As you can see though, Donut here is caught in a bit of a bad spot, although likely not as bad as Dusmit of the Empire, who, after going down due to their injuries, has now unfortunately burned to death. And because that death was not caused by the Panthers, we do in fact also receive a small relationship penalty. Thankfully though, it remains the only one, even after another death is announced here. From our relatively safe position then, and with no more regard for friendly fire, we then continue to take potshots into the Inferno. Our helpers continue to take a loss after loss, mostly due to the flames, but it looks like we did actually manage to fight off every last Panther. Those who are not dead yet will soon be consumed by the fire, although we should probably try to avoid more of the Imperial troops from suffering that same fate, so it is Maniac for the rescue. The other three can thankfully still walk. Another addition of the 1.4 update, by the way, is that rain will no longer set in quite as fast as soon as fire appears on the map, and we'll have to see how that affects us. I don't think it should be too problematic though, at least if we can avoid our second wooden barrier from catching fire. Thankfully, our ideology does not consider burning trees harmed, so despite being tree lovers, we will not receive any mood penalties. With Leafheart Kevin then tending to the injured, and with that shuttle quest unfortunately already expired, although I doubt we're currently in a good position to take care of it anyway. Either way, we now receive some cargo pods and have insect jelly dropping right into the flames. Not necessarily a priority to grab right now, and to make up for the lost quest, we now receive another one, and potentially a lot more interesting. Once again, it is time to raid an ancient complex for more information about the mysterious relic, the Sword Redhawk, and we actually also already have another quest that would also give us information, so perhaps we'll soon be able to equip our very own melee champion. Until then, we should probably talk about the fact that despite the last Panthers now having burned to death, we have not yet received a quest completion message, which strikes me as a bit odd, especially considering that the health status of our helpers was explicitly not mentioned as a completion criteria. Well, we'll have to see, maybe it comes in later. For now, unfortunately, one of our guests has suffered a mental break, and breaking is in fact very high on their menu right now, as they will now smash stuff inside of our temple. However, arresting them to stop that would immediately cause the Empire to become hostile towards us, so there is really not much we can do here other than to hope that they don't actually destroy anything, which I think the tantrum is scripted not to do, so at least there's that. Still, technically, I don't believe we should actually be in this situation. Again, I had expected the quest to automatically complete itself once the last Panther falls, and at that point our helpers should have left on their own. Maybe this has something to do with the game-changing versions between receiving and completing the quest. Either way, my suspicion is rising that we are dealing with a bug here. So let's keep an eye on it, but for now focus on slightly more important issues, namely avoiding the fire from spreading into our base. With half of our colony helping out, the flames are thankfully quickly extinguished, and a few hours later, with the sun slowly rising again, we can take a look at another 1.4 feature, because finally we have useful shelves. Each square of shelf can now actually hold 3 stacks of items, so for example, this 1x2 shelf here can now hold up to 450 units of wood. This will also make storage space much less of an issue than it has been in the past, although we will likely still let worthless leathers, clothing and weapons rot away, simply to avoid our colony wealth from rising too quickly. After the events of the last episode, by the way, where we briefly scratched that 200,000 silver mark, I think we are now back to around about 140,000, as most of the enemy corpses and clothing have already deteriorated. Still, I do believe it's time to take an important next step towards becoming a bit more civilized, if you will, as in today's episode we are finally making the switch over to fine meals. At the moment, our dryads are simply pumping out way more berries than we need for kibble production, and using some of them to make fine meals for everyone will also cut down on our need for hunting. Alternatively, should we run low on berries, there is now also the option to make carnivore fine meals, although they are not the most efficient to make, requiring 0.75 units of nutrition from meat versus the 0.5 that a regular fine meal requires from meat and vegetables. Still, I think the Cult of Jingz has earned it, especially since a heatwave now strikes the Cold Bog, and perhaps brings back memories of our Extreme Desert series. I believe temperatures should remain in the mid-30 degrees though, Celsius that is, so heatstroke should likely not become an issue for anyone. Armando meanwhile has just finished another Ravager armor made from Thrumbofur, and thanks to that and its excellent quality, the sharp protection here now actually surpasses that of Cataphract armor, so I think from here on out, Tuk will be very well protected. Freya then also suffers a mental break and goes to hide in her room, but other than that, the day remains mostly uneventful. In the evening, our guests from the Empire are for some reason still here, and as you can see, the quest is also still considered to be active. At this point though, I am fairly convinced that we are in fact dealing with a bug, so let's use the power of development mode to force this quest to finally finish. And there we are, our Eltex gear finally arrives and our 4 Imperial friends make their way off the map. One of them did actually leave behind a plasteel gladius, which we might want to bring back to the base, as it's not a bad weapon, although the Thrombohorn, which deals roughly the same damage, has it beat in armor penetration, and we currently have 6 of them. A few hours later then, fantastic news, colony leader Specs has awoken from her psychic coma, and so the entire Cult of Jingz is happy and healthy, maybe except for Freya, who is still in her mental break. And just as one of our prisoners goes berserk, the last Imperial champion makes it off the map. Unfortunately, we do not receive any relationship bonuses for sending any of them back alive, but at least the situation in our prison does not escalate any further, as the instigator is quickly struck down. And yes, I know, we should probably do something about the fact that we currently have 5 prisoners housed in here, especially since these violent mental breaks do not exactly help any of them make a full recovery. I have a few things planned though, but first it's time for another tree torment, as I believe that Squiggs has more than proved her worth to the Cult of Jingz. Her animal handling skills have helped us out more than once and she played an important role in the second to last episode, so I think she has more than earned her first ritual scar. As always, accompanied by the great music from Eric Murray, Redini gets to cutting and this time chooses Squiggs' left arm, and just in that moment a rat also self-tames, but as you can imagine it won't be alive for long. Freya's mental break then finally comes to an end and the tree torment is only considered to be boring, but perhaps things are getting a bit more exciting soon, as we are about to tackle the love situation for Took. As you might remember, Took has fallen in love with a former guest of ours, Raven, who unfortunately had to leave Liviana again. However, I think the future might still be bright for our warrior Cook, and also for whoever ends up with him, as we're now finally installing that love enhancer on Took. Yes, my first impulse was to give it to Maniac, but due to his quick sleeper trait he just spends so little time in bed that it's barely worth it, while Took could be a much more worthwhile candidate. And while the operation is underway, we're also starting a second tree torment for Squiggs, and with the love enhancer then successfully installed, we also have a warg attacking hunter Chutney, although as always he takes quick care of the problem. And it's a good thing he does, because he's now also going to be the one to harvest the Gauranland seed that we still have on the map for quite some time now, and shortly after Redini goes back to her old ways and places a ritual scar on Squiggs' right eye, we also receive the info that the anima tree is ready for another linking ritual. For the moment though, I think we'll save that and instead have Chutney plant that Gauranland tree, and accompanied by most of our colonists, he will now also be the one to bond with it. And so a satisfying tree torment is followed by a successful tree connection, and Chutney will now actually also start to cultivate berrymaker dryads. I ran the numbers on those fine meals and kibble, and with our colony potentially growing by 1 or 2 more colonists, and with our bears also requiring kibble, at least in the summer, I think we're cutting it a bit close with only 4 berrymaker dryads. 2 or 3 more should suffice though, so Chutney will not spend all of his days pruning. Inside of our tree temple, meanwhile, Squiggs gets her right arm scarified as well, and with that is done for the time being. And I actually also think that we will leave it at that in terms of overall scarification. With the next ideology reform, we could go 1 level higher and bump the required number up to 5, but I feel like at that point the risk of stacking multiple scars on top of the same body part becomes just a bit too much, not to mention that the mood and opinion bonuses for having people scarified do not really rise that much further, so we would very much be entering the territory of diminishing returns. Still, let me know what you think about it. Do you want us to take scarification to the extreme? The further increased pain levels would of course have some positive effects as well on mood and psycasting power, but again, I'm not entirely sure if we actually need those bonuses. In any case, the night passes by uneventfully, and on the next morning we can watch Maniac do some mining. I think it's time that our bears, who we use mainly for hauling, move to a more centralized location, not to mention that our animal handler Squiggs also has the undergrounder trait, and will therefore receive a small mood bonus for taking care of the animals in a cave. With a thick fog setting over the cold bog, it is then also time for another tree torment. However, for a change, this time Redini will be the target and not the cutter. That role falls to colony leader Specs, who will now ensure that our tree speaker has all the required scars as well, with number 2 now going onto Redini's left arm. Other than the +3 mood bonus from a spectacular ritual then, not much else happens that is noteworthy, and so in the late evening Redini is up to be cut once again, this time for her third and final scar. In the process, Specs improves her social skill to level 7 and the heatwave also comes to an end. The scar meanwhile goes, very fittingly, on Redini's left eye, going along nicely with the one on her right. Just in that moment, a berserk mental break in our prison then demands our attention, mostly because its target is a very skilled melee fighter, and he might be able to do some damage. As you can see, 2 of his cellmates are down already, and he's currently going to town on a third. Luckily though, his rage comes to an end before he gets to our potential next psycaster, and before Maniac has to intervene. Still, especially regarding that next psycaster, it might be a good idea to keep them safe from their violent surroundings, so they will now move into that one free building we still have. The others should probably be separated soon too, and that is why Maniac starts digging once again here, carving out a few small prison cells right next to our temple. In the meantime, converting our potential next psycaster to the Cult of Jingz proves to be a difficult task because of their abrasive and psychopath traits, and so Redini only manages to reduce their certainty by a meager 2% here, so this could take a while. On another foggy morning then, a new Yak is born. This one will now go by the name of Rimworld, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who is actually a long time Patreon supporter and now finally gets their name into a game as well. Chutney and Donut meanwhile spent their day hunting a few more free-range Yaks, while over by the temple our bear cave and prison cells are slowly taking shape. In the late afternoon then, the fog clears and it's time for yet another tree torment. For some reason it looks like Chutney is still missing 2 scars, so let's change that with Redini giving him one on his torso. Armando also goes into a work frenzy, so crafting will go a little faster for the next few days, although at the moment we sadly don't have any of the materials needed to make some high quality armors, so he will have to be content with making buffalo wool tribal wear. A spectacular tree torment then boosts the mood for everyone, and we can continue our mission to find Took some love, this time using Freya's Word of Love psycast. By casting this on Took and setting Donut as the target, Took's disposition towards Donut rises significantly, and who knows, maybe that's already enough for the 2 of them to get romantically intertwined. We might have to cast it on Donut as well though, as she doesn't really hold Took in the highest regard at the moment, but for now let's send everyone off to bed, including Robola, who now gets a very own prison cell. By the way, with our colonists switching up to fine meals, I have switched our prisoners down to kibble. Let us not forget that the Cult of Jingz is run by a bloodthirsty psychopath, and our prisoners will also get to experience that a bit more personally in the next episode. For now though, we can watch as Freya is throwing a party, and after a crowded gathering gives everyone a small mood bonus, our prisoners are slowly but steadily moved over to their new homes. And for the most part, that is all that happens on this day, until Donut runs into a small problem in the evening. Hunting a group of caribou, he has unfortunately caused a few of them to go manhunter, and so the evening's meditation session has to be briefly interrupted. Thanks to a few last-second psycasts and the help of our bears though, it looks like we should be able to get this under control. 1 or 2 lucky dodges then prevent anyone from taking any injuries, that is of course except for our bears, but that's what they're here for. Before everyone heads off to bed then, it's time for a conversion ritual. I think our new psycasting candidate needs to be nudged in the right direction. So while Redini speaks to and about the Cult of Jingz, let us hope that she can remove those last 17% of certainty, and it looks like she can, or at least kind of. Our target is now down to exactly 0% certainty, and we have gained another ideology development point as well. However, it looks like it will take just a tiny bit more convincing. Unfortunately, it also looks like they patched out the ability to use convert immediately after a conversion ritual, so I suppose this will have to wait until the next morning. And that morning starts with Chutney now also putting on a Thrumbofur Ravager armor, although only of good quality. Still, in terms of protection, this is about the best we can do while remaining at this tech level. Another berserk rage in our prison cell then for the first time does not actually cause any problems, at least not for our prisoners, while Redini and Thoraya do in fact catch some injuries, as together with Armando they quickly pacify our captive. The rest of our fighting squad meanwhile goes muffalo hunting, and in this case I am actually hoping for them all to go manhunter, because they should not pose any sort of threat to our collective firepower. And it does also eventually happen, but at that point most of the animals are already dead. Either way, our meat supply for the next few days is very much secured. Shortly after then, Redini finally manages to convert our psycasting prisoner, and it looks like that just earned us another ideology development point, which means we now all of a sudden have the option to once again reform the Cult of Jingz. Now I think we'll talk a bit more about what that could mean in the next episode. At this point though, I would already be very interested to hear what your ideas are. Keep in mind that we have one last slot for a meme to choose, and I would be very curious to hear what you think that meme could be. Before we wrap things up for today then, I have one quick thing that we might want to address, and that would be the fact that Donut is very much completely unsuitable as a love candidate for Tuk, because as you can see here, she's gay. So it looks like Tuk will have to look elsewhere, and I think that Squigs, our animal handler, would make for a good replacement, and the second use of the word of love psycast here thankfully also overrides the first, so Tuk's feelings for Donut are vanishing as quickly as they arrived. In the afternoon then, we have a transport pod from the Empire crash in the swamp, and even though I'm not really looking to add another colonist at this point, especially not an 83-year-old with no other skills but social and intellectual, I think we are still going to rescue them and hope that they leave on their own afterwards, which should then give us a small relationship bonus with the Empire, and after Spex's neuroquake in the last episode, I think we could use one. And so, while Leafheart Kevin takes care of the injured, Redini and Chutney take care of the last tree torment, and just in that moment we are also informed of the fact that a group of cows have joined us. Before we get to them, we can watch as Chutney receives his third and final ritual scar on his head. Kevin also makes sure that our crashed refugee survives, and shortly after, our last tree torment for now finishes in satisfying fashion. Shortly after, Squig swiftly adds the cows to our meat supply, and with that, another night sets across the swamp, and I think it's time to slowly start wrapping things up. So, as we once again marvel at some fan art, this week including work from Chrysaor, which I understand to be a little bit biotech inspired, as well as a neuroquake rendition from Tony Murchison, once again the reminder to please let me know your thoughts and ideas for the next ideology reform in the comments down below. We can choose one more meme, we can make more changes to precepts, rituals and all that other good stuff, so feel free to let me know which direction you would like to see the Cult of Jingz go in next. Other than that, I am also very cautiously thinking about perhaps adding a psycasting mod, something to give psycasts just a bit more usefulness in combat, because as it stands right now, the only thing that is really useful against larger groups of enemies is berserk pulse, as we should probably not always go with the nuclear option in Neuroquake. So if you have suggestions for something lightweight that does not completely break the game but does add a few more combat options, then I would be very thankful for that. And of course, feel free to leave any other things you'd like to get off your chest down below in the comments as well. And I think that's it for today, so as always, if you enjoyed the episode, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up, and if you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.